Begin this morning with new developments in the Paris terror attacks. In a new video released overnight, the head of Al-Qaeda in Yemen claimed responsibility for the Charlie Hebdo attack, which took place 1 week ago today. The new issue of the satirical newspaper features the Prophet Muhammad on the cover, which is now sparking concerns of possible additional attacks. The paper sold out in France within minutes. Officials say the gunman, as well as the man behind the kosher market siege, had a wide web of financial and logistical support. Police say they had advanced equipment that likely came from overseas, including military-style weapons. And there is also dramatic new video that shows the Kouachi brothers immediately after the Charlie Hebdo attacks. It shows them calmly returning to their getaway car before celebrating their actions and then firing shots at police. Here is the tape in its entirety.
C'est ça la France. Allez, c'est le football. L'odeur, elle est pas... Janek, schowaj pałę.
Oh là 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 là, oh là là, le massacre, oh le massacre. Ah là. Oh le massacre.
C'est football, c'est football. Non, c'est pas football.
Si, ça rebondit là.
Aïe, les flics là, quand ils ont tué.
Ils ont pété les bagnoles.
Là, ils vont là.
Janek, schowaj się.
We want to get a more full picture of those moments after the attack. Here with us now, MSNBC contributor Don Borelli. He's the former assistant special agent in charge of the joint FBI-NYPD terrorism task force. Don, take us through the video again. What do you think, first of all, is extremely significant about it? What do you see about the gunman, but also the police response?
Sure. So the first thing you mentioned in the intro, just how calmly they go about their business, reloading their weapons, kind of claiming responsibility, getting in the car. I mean, these guys are not in a rush to get out of there. They seem very much in control, and this speaks to some obvious training and practice for this situation. Then they get in the car, they advance on the police car, and then as they approach, you see them get out of the car, using, keep the doors open and using the car as cover, the doors, and then moving tactically, using that building as they advance on the police car while firing.
Now, what about the police car that's backing up while they're coming at them? Obviously, they're getting shot at.
Yep.
Is that the proper technique for the police, or should they have blocked the road? What should they have done?
When you encounter a potential lethal threat, the first thing that you're taught, at least that I was taught in the FBI, is to get cover. I mean, clearly the police officer knew that he was outgunned. These guys had military-grade weapons. So in this case, cover is putting some distance between you and the attacker and using that car, that engine block, as potentially the thing that's going to save your life. So I think they acted appropriately in this situation.
All right.
When you're looking at this tape, what is significant about it to you? Obviously, you're describing what we're seeing, but as somebody who's trying to sort of put together clues about these people, what does it tell you? What's the next step?
I think, again, it's one thing, a lot of people go to the shooting range and they'll stand statically at the line and shoot at a paper target, very much in control. These guys are moving and shooting. They have all this equipment on. That's a very difficult situation. It takes training to do that. And then we saw the still pictures the first day that they had, a very tight group of shots into the windshield of that car. Again, these guys are trained killers. That speaks to the level of training and that they'd received. And this is a different situation situation than we saw in Canada or Australia or even in Boston. These guys are definitely had a lot of practice at this.
All right, Don Borelli, thank you so much.
Thank you,
really
Don.
do appreciate it. It is frightening looking at just how calm they are. As Don said, and going through it, they're professional, they were trained, they knew exactly what they were doing. Of course, breaking news this morning that Al-Qaeda in Yemen officially coming out and taking responsibility for this.
Yeah, and the other thing you're reminded of watching that is that they're fully prepared to die. I mean, they're taking their time. They know they've done what they've done. The police are going to respond any minute, and they're slowly, methodically going about their business, getting out of their car as a police car comes. They were ready, willing to die, and as they believe, to become martyrs.
Well, meanwhile, the world's largest intelligence sharing network will meet next week to discuss its efforts to fight terrorism. The U.S., Australia, Canada, Britain, and New Zealand, collectively known as Five Eyes, will take part. French lawmakers have voted in favor of extending airstrikes against Islamic State militants. And here at home, the White House is responding to criticism that it's refusing to refer to the Paris terror attacks as, quote, radical Islam. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest explained why the Obama administration believes it would be wrong to do so.
The first is accuracy. We want to describe exactly what happened. These are individuals who carried out an act of terrorism, and they later tried to justify that act of terrorism by invoking the religion of Islam and their own deviant view of it. The second is, this is an act that was roundly condemned by Muslim leaders. We also don't want to be in a situation where we are legitimizing what we consider to be a completely illegitimate justification for this violence.
So, Carol Lee, a lot of Americans are really confused when they see reports of Islamic extremism on television for well over a decade. And it has become really the defining ideology of our time as far as what we respond to. We are fighting against the Islamic State.
And have been for a long time.
And have been fighting against ISIS and fighting against Al-Qaeda. These are people that run planes into buildings, not because they want to gain territory, but because they believe they're martyrs, and that's how they're going to be rewarded. It is all about their extreme version of religion. So let me ask a question that millions and millions of Americans are asking. What's with the White House? Why won't they call Islamic extremism Islamic extremism?
Well, a couple things. One, you heard the press secretary say that they don't want to elevate this and legitimize these actors and buy into their narrative of what they're doing and why. And secondly, and I think this is probably more significant, is that you have a president who thinks very carefully about the language that the White House uses. Remember, early on, he got rid of the quote-unquote war on terror language. Right. And he's also very careful in talking about these issues not to look as if the U.S. is in some way condemning Islam or talking negatively about the religion. Right. And so I think that's why you're seeing this effort that may be confusing to some folks.
Yeah, it's confusing. But I mean, we've had that discussion here on this show over the past week, obviously, Mika, where you've had one person after another coming on saying, no, 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 this is not Islamic extremism. These are not Islamists. Yeah. And let's roll a tape of just a couple of things that have been said on this set.
You know, this is a chronic problem. I stopped calling these people Muslim terrorists. They're about as Muslim as I am. I mean, they have no respect for anybody else's life. That's not what the Quran says. And you know, Europe has an enormous radical problem, and an enormous. I think ISIS is a cult, not an Islamic cult. I think it's a cult. This is really complicated stuff, and I think you have to treat these people as basically mass murderers. But I do not think that we should accord them any particular religious respect, because I don't think whatever they're claiming their motivation is clearly is a twisted cultish mind.
Now, the Muslims will say, not all Muslims, but some of them will say, so why isn't there a law against defaming Muhammad? Why are there laws against some kind of speech and not laws against other kinds of speech? And it comes down to a political issue, and I think that's understood here in France, particularly by the Muslim community. In terms of incitement to violence, I think that's generally exaggerated. But of course, there are a lot of you know, what would you call fundamentalist preachers in the Muslim world, just as there are crazy fundamentalist preachers in many other religions, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, who will try and incite their congregations.
I just don't hear this burning debate over whether or not to use the word Islamic.
No, that's heartening.
You use it if it's appropriate, you use it if it's not.
There is Gene's going to have to write a column about that.
I know.
Harold, because there has been a burning debate. The White House since 2010 has been trying to pretend this isn't a problem. And it's, yes, only a very small percentage of Muslim extremists go out and kill. But, well, Mika has some numbers from Pew polling just from last year. There is a cultural divide between a lot of Muslim countries and France and England and America. And if we don't understand this, we make the same mistakes that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and that administration made, thinking they were going to go into these countries and find Thomas Jefferson.
Well, adding the word extremist to the phrase, isn't that clarity enough, I guess would be the question some would ask. Pew polling has numbers on more extreme elements of Islam. When it comes to stoning as punishments, more than 8 in 10 Muslims in Pakistan and Afghanistan who want Islamic law as their country's official law say adulterers should be stoned. Nearly as many say the same in the Palestinian territories and in Egypt. It's 81%. A majority also supports stoning as a penalty for the unfaithful in Jordan, 67% there. It's 60% in Malaysia. When it comes to conversions, taking the life of those who abandon Islam is most widely supported in Egypt, 86%, and Jordan, 82%, roughly 2/3 who want Sharia to be the law of the land, that's important, also back this penalty in the Palestinian territories. In the other countries surveyed in the Middle East, North Africa region, fewer than half take this view.
So, Harold, we have to acknowledge. We have to acknowledge, do we not, the nature of the threat?
One other voice.
And the difference.
One other voice you might have shown was David Ignatius, who's talked about the, on your show, talked about the funeral of one of the police officers who had a relative get up at the funeral and say, look, those who committed these acts are not Muslims, they're terrorists. But those numbers are hard to refute what Mika just put up from the Pew poll. You know, the White House, the language, I agree with Carol. I think that this White House and certainly this president, language is very, very important to him, as it should be. But at the same time, you can't refute those numbers.
But should you, though, I mean, would it have been helpful for FDR to say, well, you know, Nazism is not extreme German nationalism? What purpose? Yes, it was. And yes, this is Muslim extremism that Saudi Arabia, one of our good allies, have spent billions and billions of dollars promoting across the globe over the past quarter century.
But I could see how good Muslims would say
of course.
These are not Muslims.
We say this all the time on the show. Well over 1 billion people. I said yesterday, Willie, that I wouldn't print the cartoon.
But in fairness to those numbers do not support the violent acts and the terrorist acts that we saw in Paris. I can understand someone supporting their religion. I'm not a Muslim. I can understand.
Right. But if Christians were going out, blowing away 3,000 people in the name of Jesus and carrying around crosses, my God! I mean, the things that we're accused, Christians are accused of starting crusades for, like, I don't know, just the simplest of things are just absolutely outrageous.
Well, you could also imagine if that were happening that somebody would say those aren't Christians, which is what
exactly
is trying to do.
We understand that. I'm just saying there are Christians, there are extreme Christians, not extreme Christians that go out and kill 3,000 people on 9/11. There are Muslims. There are extreme Muslims. I don't quite understand, Jeremy Peters, why this is even a debate inside the White House.
I think Carol raises a really astute point, and that this White House seems to be overly cautious in how it uses language at times. But I do think we also need to acknowledge a big piece of why we're having this discussion, and that's because every time there is a terrorist attack, there are conservative pundits who use the president's language as a sign of a way to show that he's soft on terror. This happened with the Fort Hood shooting. This happened with Benghazi. And, you know, why isn't that you hear everyone on Fox News saying, well, why won't the president call this terror? And basically what this is, it's less, I think, a debate about, you know, what the president thinks and more a political attempt to make him look like he's soft.
Well, I don't know that I would call myself a conservative pundit. If you talk to a lot of conservatives, hold on a second though. But I am genuinely confused, as I guarantee you an overwhelming majority of Americans, Jeremy, are confused why he doesn't call Islamic extremism Islamic extremism. I mean, I genuinely am confused. And I want to know what's it is Islamic extremism. Willie, I would.
It's not a game the White House is playing very well.
I said yesterday, Willie, again, I want to reiterate that I personally would not show a cartoon of Mohammed. Why?
I know.
You know why?
I know.
Because it would offend 1.5 billion Muslims. Just like I would hope somebody reporting on a story of people putting a crucifix in a jar of urine
Everyone has their
wouldn't
line.
show that. I mean, you can be deferential to 1.5 billion Muslims, and in fact, it helps Muslims if you point out that these are Muslim extremists instead of Muslims. I don't know.
It's not a condemnation of the greater Muslim faith to tell the truth about what happened. In this case, we just watched a video where we watched these two guys who had just come out of an office where they slaughtered an office full of cartoonists and killed a security guard and later police
including
officers.
Muslims.
And said, we have avenged the Prophet Muhammad. They just said that explicitly, and they said they were responding to the cartoons on the cover and cartoons within the pages of Charlie Hebdo. Has nothing to do with the greater Muslim faith. We know what it is. It's a great faith, and these guys misrepresented it, and they bastardized
the people
Muslim.
who
and by the way,
this faith feel like their faith is being taken hostage by these terrorists. We understand that.
I do feel like, since I am leading and this discussion, talking about it, I think now would be a good time to say that I supported the community center at Ground Zero. When I think about 1% of the I think 1% of the population supported that out of sensitivity to the Muslim population. This is just plain stupid on the White House's part. And I think you have to call the threat what it's.
They want to show unity with all different countries and faiths. Go to the unity event.
Hey, and why didn't they go to the unity event? I don't understand.
You were in the minority there.
Oh yeah, I'm often in the minority.
You are.
But I want you to know I do it out of love, Carol. I do it out of. Hey, really quick.